The fact that we're not going to find somebody perfect, which is true. We all fall short of the glory. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't look around for the best person available to stand for those things which are right. The second point about people with experience in government, I think experience in some sense with politics and government is a good thing. But on the other hand, if that experience has led to the erosion of conviction, if it has led to innumerable compromises of principle, if it has led, as it does in our politics now, to placing ambition ahead of everything else, then we shouldn't be looking for people with that kind of experience, because that kind of experience is harmful and it's going to be hurtful to the country that we would elect leaders of that kind. We never want to put ourselves in a position where we're going to exclude, let's say, an Abraham Lincoln, because we've adopted a criteria that requires that people be professional pals rather than ordinary citizens. Sometimes, out of the body of our citizens will come the kind of understanding and wisdom we need, rather than out of the body of those who have dedicated themselves over the last 40, 50 years to a false understanding of what our politics is all about. And I'm afraid a lot of our politicians have surrendered to that false understanding, the belief that it's all interest group stuff, that it doesn't involve principle, that morality should be no part of it, and so forth and so on. You hear that kind of stuff from Republicans as well as Democrats. And that, I think, is a serious problem. So of whether or not, first of all, things and have done so, not just with their mouths, but with their careers. And this is one of the questions I ask myself when I look at some of these people who are offering themselves for our choice, standing forward Romney to say he's all pro-life and stuff, and I'm saying I've been fighting in the pro-life trenches for a long time. Never saw him there. A matter of fact, saw him on the other side. He put those up, and it's okay to be converted. But even St. Paul wasn't offered leadership in the Christian community the moment he came off the road to Damascus. It took, in fact, quite a lot of time, sacrifice that nearly cost him his life, so that people could see by deeds and fruits, not just by words, that he had, in fact, been transformed. So I think these Johnny-come-latelys who show up saying, I'm now mouthing the words I want to hear, we live in a time when they can take polls and focus groups and come up with those words. That doesn't prove a thing. And I think I'm looking for somebody who stands forward and says, here are my wounds. I got this wound in the battle we fought for life at this time. I got this wound in the battle we fought against embryonic stem cell research. I got these wounds and made these sacrifices in the battle we had to fight against homosexual marriage in this place and that. And I look at the candidates who are now on offer, and guess what? I don't see wounds on any of them.
By the way, we are offering now a DVD of your speech where you and I spoke at Mount Rushmore, and Dr. Dobson and Rick Scarborough and others. That is available. In fact, I'll have to get you a copy of this when we talk during the break, because you've been there. You've been in the battle, and there's no question about that. Smitty, been waiting in Kenosha. Welcome.
Dr. Keith, first of all, what an honor to speak with you. And Janet, I got to tell you, I love it when you hear a brother in the Lord telling it like it is, like this to people.
I was feeling sorry for our friend in Fort Lauderdale, but we welcome all calls, don't we? Especially, you can't have a better guest to take on any hostility than this man. But go ahead.
The problem with the truth that a Dr. Keys dispenses is it forces an apathetic, reluctant, and lukewarm listener. It causes him to have to take some kind of action. And what we need in America today is someone to wake the church up, wake Christian folk up, and get us to realize that the cost of freedom is shed blood. It began with Jesus on the cross for us. And to preserve our liberty, we're going to have to answer our call to servanthood and sacrifice, and remember the second commandment, to put others before ourselves.
Well said. Dr. Keith, I'll let you respond.
Oh, no, I think that's entirely true. We have come into a period when the profession of Christian faith must again be sacrificial. When we must realize that Good Friday precedes resurrection, and we're called to walk in Christ's footsteps on both days. And he calls us to salvation, but as witnesses of his truth, he also calls us to a sacrificial dedication to his Father's will, and that includes in our vocation as citizens.
Well said. Dr. Alan Keyes is our guest. Lines are pretty full. Go to those lines. Dr. Keyes, I want to get your take on the latest in the news. Donald, who has said that America twisted that and used it as an excuse to attack Iran. And meanwhile, you've got Nancy Pelosi, who's greeted in Syria with open arms, which might very well advertise that Americans' disunity of the terrorist sponsoring nation. And I want to get your take on what many are calling treason.
Well, I think the behavior of the who would be commander-in-chief confront the world in foreign policy terms because they knew the nation will be torn apart if it has several heads when it confronts the rest of the world. If it can be picked apart by people who can play Americans off against one another so that we don't have consistent policies. That was debated during the Constitutional Convention, and the idea of a plural executive in which you have people able to run off and do their own thing in military security and foreign policy was rejected. Now, what Nancy Pelosi is doing, in other words, is completely violating the tenets of the separation of powers and offering opportunities for our most deadly enemies to then believe that they'll be able to set Americans off against each other so they can get away with continuing their murderous behavior. And I think that that is so dangerous to the Constitution and to our national security that Americans need to wake up and call the Democrats to account. They don't have the right to put the security of this country on the table in play as a pawn of their political ambitions, and they ought to stop.
What do you say about Rosie O'Donnell, certainly not an elected official, but one who's outspoken against America? Any comments on that?
Well, I don't know. We have had amongst these people in the Hollywood set been borderline traitors for the longest time. We can remember Jane Fonda running around with the people in North Vietnam and so forth and so on. I think that we live in a country where people have freedom of speech. If they want to blather on in insane and illogical ways, they can do so. My worry is, however, when folks start to take them seriously and then give them a credibility in our politics and elsewhere that could lead to disastrous results. So I think we have to be warned against letting these people influence our understanding of our policies or ourselves, and that will be a sufficient response to the danger that they pose.
Think ABC should fire her?
I'm not even going to comment on ABC. These media networks have their own agenda, all bad for America. I think ABC actually has something to take its place. And I think that of most media. So the fact that they're not able to do this or that doesn't surprise me, because I've seen much worthwhile coming out of them in a couple of decades, including the fact that their news programs now are an intolerable combination of silly entertainment and pure propaganda.
Well said. Michael in Oconomowoc, welcome.
Hi, John. We do so much fighting on the front here with Safe to Act and making phone call after phone call for every issue that is against God's will. Why don't we all get off our tails and support this guy and, stop writing a book and let's get you on the presidency campaign.
For the call, Michael. Dr. Keyes?
Well, I think that I have felt over the course of time that trying to finish this book was terribly important. It's called The Theology of Freedom, and it's about the very things we're talking about. I aim to show in the book people to think the fact that there is a biblical foundation for our constitutional system, and that when we depart from the truths and the understanding of, say, natural law and natural rights that are derived from that biblical understanding, we depart from the only foundation that can keep this republic alive. My aim in doing this is to try to get Christians to wake up, to realize there is no secular basis for maintaining this republic, that we must witness to and represent with our votes our understanding of the right basis, which includes reverence and respect for God. We have the right to do that. We have the obligation to do that. And we shouldn't be taught of it by these people who are trying to establish state atheism as the religion of America so that they can, in effect, destroy the argument that actually gives the people the right to govern themselves.
I don't